Bob Corker is the outgoing senator from Tennessee. He is a Republican, deeply right-wing. I don't agree with him on 98% of issues. And he is part of the Republican establishment. I'm no fan of theirs. I fight them day in and day out. But now that he is not running for re-election and he is free, he has decided that for the betterment of the country, he's going to speak out against Donald Trump. And boy, he is not shy about it. So this is not to say that I back the Republican establishment. I do not, and I have great bones to pick with him. But at least this one guy, since he's not up for re-election anymore, is speaking a little bit of truth to this particular power, which is the demagogue of Donald Trump. So without further ado, here is Senator Bob Corker.
When you look at the fact that we've got this issue in North Korea and the president continues to kneecap his diplomatic representative, the Secretary of State, and really move him away from successful diplomatic negotiations with China, which is key to this, you're taking us on a path to combat.
On a path to combat, kneecapping his own Secretary of State, but he's just getting warmed up. He did 3 different giant interviews today. And of course, Trump responded. We'll get to that in a second, but more from the first interview.
I would just like for him to leave it to the professionals for a while and see if we can do something that's constructive for our country, the region, and the world.
Now, normally I wouldn't agree because I think the professionals have led us to war after war, and I have very little faith in them, if any. On the other hand, in this case, the alternative is Donald Trump, who's a wild egomaniac, completely indifferent to other people's lives, and God knows what he'll do with North Korea or Iran. So the only time that I would ever trust the establishment over someone else is when that someone else is Donald Trump. And this is a member of the Republican Party going, watch out, he is way more dangerous than you realize. Keep it going.
Left to his own devices, do you think the president is a threat to national security?
I think that there are people around him that work in an effort to contain him.
Well, that almost seems to accept the premise of the question, if he needs to be contained.
Publicly, when you kneecap your Secretary of State, whose diplomacy you have to depend upon to really bring China to the table to do the things that need to be done, back channeling in some cases to North Korea. When you kneecap that effort, you really move our country into a binary choice, which could lead to a world war. So yes, I want him to support diplomatic efforts, not embarrass and really malign efforts that are underway to try to get some kind of diplomatic solution.
So he is out of control. Yes, doubling down from a couple of weeks ago when he said his actions could lead to World War III. He is destabilizing. This is basically a very right-wing member of his own party saying, you have no idea how stupid and unbalanced he is. We have got to get a hold of him and control of him because you don't know what he's capable of doing, because Corker is not deciding this on his own and outside of the White House. He has talked to all those people in the White House, the chief of staff, the Secretary of State, the defense secretary. He's talked to all of them. They're using him as a conduit for, watch out, you don't understand, we deal with this guy every day. The guy is nuts. That's the message that Corker is delivering. He is not a Democrat. He is not anyone's liberal. He ran arguably ads with definite racial undertones at a minimum against Harold Ford Jr. in his own race. Okay, so this is not a guy who's shy about being massively right-wing and appealing to the base. And he is saying, you don't get it. This isn't about appealing to the base. This guy is unstable. He's not anywhere near done. Keep it going.
His leadership and just his stability and the lack of desire to be competent on issues and understand, and nothing has changed.
His desire to be competent on issues is not there. I told you, what did I tell you during the election? I did 100 Loser Donald segments to impress upon you that the guy has no competence. He's a total nincompoop. He's an incompetent buffoon. And now you've got Republican senators saying the same thing because he's totally out of control. One more here.
During the campaign, at the beginning of his administration, you supported the president. Do you regret that now?
What do you think? Look,
I think that's
I think people, look, I think there were many people, I was one of those, that hoped that, he would rise to the occasion as president and aspire to lead our nation instead of dividing it. And, it's obvious his political model and governing model is to divide.
He is not leading our nation, he is dividing us. So that's, by the way, I undercounted, that's 3 interviews already. He's gonna do one later with CNN as well. Actually, one more clip from the ABC interview.
It's a sad place from my perspective for our nation, and I think that the worst of it is going to be just the whole debasing, if you will, of our nation. I think that'll be the contribution that hurts our nation most.
Do you think the president's debasing the nation?
I don't think there's any question, but that's the case, just in the way that he conducts himself and goes to such a low level. I do.
Wow, a Republican senator saying that the Republican president is debasing our nation. There's no question that he's debasing the country. This is not normal. This never happens. In my lifetime, I have never seen this, where sitting senators from the president's party go out and say that president from their own party is so bad, they are dividing the country, not bringing the country together. They are debasing the nation and all the other insults, and they are unstable and a danger to the world and might start World War III. And that is armed with information from inside the White House. Another quote here from HuffPost. When asked if he would support Donald Trump in another election, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman said, quote, "No way." Now, of course, the empire strikes back. So Donald Trump, having seen this, is apoplectic and grabs his tweeter machine right away. He's like, time for some tweets, I'll show him. So here comes Donald Trump. By the way, before we get to this is his effort to show that, no, Bob Corker is not correct. I'm very stable. Let's see how this goes. Bob Corker, who helped President Obama give us a bad Iran deal and couldn't get elected dog catcher in Tennessee, is now fighting tax cuts. Okay, let's tell you all the different ways that is wrong. First of all, there was a procedural vote that Bob Corker voted with the Democrats on the Iran deal. He eventually voted no on the Iran deal. That's why I told you Bob Corker is not your friend. He's not your ally. He's only an ally in this specific circumstance. He has voted the wrong way in almost every instance. And if you're a Republican, you love Bob Corker's voting record. Couldn't get elected dog catcher in Tennessee. Well, actually, he's the senator from Tennessee, so that seems to be a little bit incorrect as well, to say the least. And he's now fighting tax cuts. No way, Bob Corker loves tax cuts for the rich. He's a Republican. He just but your plan leaves a $1.5 trillion hole in deficit, and he'll probably even vote for that, okay? So everything he said there was wrong, of course, and in attacking the senator as well. Now, to be fair to Trump, he is counterattacking in this very rare instance. He usually starts the fight. In this case, Corker did, okay? Fair is fair, but still not showing a lot of stability here. Donald Trump then goes on to say, Corker dropped out of the race in Tennessee when I refused to endorse him, and now is only negative on anything Trump. Look at his record, okay? No, his record is voting with you overwhelmingly, but he's worried about the foreign policy and that you might actually launch nukes because you're monumentally stupid and don't understand the consequence of your actions. In reality, he votes with you almost every time. He did drop out of the Tennessee race, but not because Trump wouldn't endorse him. In fact, he dropped out, and then that's when Trump first got mad at him. Trump then goes on to say, isn't it sad that lightweight Senator Bob Corker, who couldn't get reelected in the great state of Tennessee, will now fight tax cuts plus? Okay, again, almost none of that is true. He is not running for re-election. That is the only part that is true. And Corker says this guy's unstable. Trump goes around going, oh yeah, lightweight Bob Corker, I'm gonna get you. And then when Corker is asked to respond to these, he tweets out, same untruths from an utterly untruthful president, hashtag alert the daycare staff. And that is a reference, he said, that to Trump being abided by an adult daycare in the White House. That's what's happening. Okay, look, but at the same time, they created this Trumpistine. The Republicans fed their base with the Southern strategy and hey, we're against gay people, don't let them get married, don't give them rights. African Americans, well, we got to restrict their voting through ID laws and first of all, that's today. For 40, 50 years, we got to restrict them in every imaginable way through the Southern strategy. We're against affirmative action, and even back when affirmative action first got started. And I can go on, and Latinos were against the immigrants, and we're against the dreamers. And you created this base that was filled with fear and hatred. And then when a Trumpenstein arose from that base, you shouldn't be overly surprised. So as much as I appreciate Bob Corker doing the patriotic thing and trying to warn the country, you don't know how dangerous this guy is, let us also recognize that he's among the people who created that Trumpenstein. Okay, now on the issue of truthfulness or not, we go back to Bob Corker for his fourth interview now. Watch.
You've called the president utterly untruthful. Are you saying he's a liar?
You know, we just haven't used that word in our family, but he obviously, all you guys can easily check just what's occurred and know that much of what he said is untrue, but all of it is untrue.
You said he's an untruthful president. Are you calling him? No question?
Yeah, no question. We grew up in our family not using the L word, okay? They're provable untruths. So I don't know, it's amazing. Unfortunately, I think world leaders are very aware that much of what he says is untrue. Certainly people here are, because these things are provably untrue. They're just factually incorrect, and people know the difference. So I don't know why he lowers himself to such a low standard and debases our country in the way that he does, but he does.
The president of the United States a liar?
The president has great difficulty with the truth on many issues.
Again, that is not from an opposing party, man. That's the same party saying our president has great difficulty with the truth. One last clip from the CNN interview.
Do you think he's a role model to children in the United States?
No.
You don't?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. All right, but believe it or not, he's not done yet. I have more quotes from Bob Corker that I'm going to read to you. Again, this is all absolutely unprecedented. Okay. He says, you would think that he would aspire to be the president of the United States and act like a president of the United States. That's just not going to be the case, apparently. And it's up to others who serve in an elected capacity, whether they're governors or mayors or senators, to try to conduct themselves in a manner that is more becoming of a leader. He obviously is not up to that. Damn. He went on to say, I've had multiple occasions where the staff has asked me to please intervene. He was getting ready to do something that was really off the tracks. That I wanted to make sure I got that in, because so you guys understand, the people that work with Donald Trump inside the White House, they're the ones giving the warning. He is off the tracks. By God, whatever you do, try to get him back on the tracks, because there's no telling what this buffoon in the White House will actually order us to do. That is what Corker is trying to do, get the country back on track. And believe me, I'm the most surprised that Bob Corker is the guy who would do the right thing and the patriotic thing in this instance to try to reel Trumpenstein back in now that he's rampaging throughout the village. Last quote from Corker. He says, I've seen no evolution in an upward way. As a matter of fact, I would say it appears to me that it's almost devolving. Not almost, completely. Every day gets worse, and we keep on going about our lives as if everything is fine. Everything is not fine. At any second, Donald Trump can do something that will change the world for the worse. And if it involves war, as I told you on election night, brace for impact. This guy has no idea what he's doing. Almost everyone in the White House, and now almost all the Republican senators, know that that is the case. That is why they're sending out people like Bob Corker and John McCain and George W. Bush and now Jeff Flake today as well, saying, watch out, you guys aren't getting it. He is totally incompetent and a complete danger to the world. the last thing I'd like to hear from these guys is, we're sorry for creating a monster like this. That would be a nice addition. Help us build independent media together. tytnetwork.com/join.